And then, oh, what then? Then they did scale the mountain, and it was a spectacular mountain, yes, and from here they could see as far as eternity, and into their souls so did creep a dread. Oh, this is brilliant. And then, they did slide down the mountainside, using little wooden rafty things which they had created using their Sherpa's bones, for they had run out of food and had required to eat them first. Yes, and then, as they were sliding down, they went, what did they go? Oh, whee! Yes, that is what they did. And next page, and then they did... they got to the river, and the river was cold, and they went, ooh, it is cold. This is a cold river, for it flows from my very soul out into the void. Right. Oh, that's a pretty good saga, actually. Might need to be a little bit longer than half a paragraph, but it's a good start. Yes. Coffee, I think. Hello and welcome to today's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy, and today we're looking at sagas. What is a saga and what sets it apart from a campaign? Surely a campaign is a saga. Well, not all sagas are made equal and not all campaigns are made as to be sagas. So we need to unpack this and understand, what does this mean? Sagas come in threes. They're bigger, but you have to show restraint. You have to show restraint. Now, we have learned a huge lesson from, say, Disney in the recent years, where they've tried to do sagas and have discovered that it's not actually for them. So we've got to use that to our own advantage and understand how do sagas work and how do we get to use them in our games to create the most epic of epicnesses ever. Well, let's jump right into it. So, sagas, the most important thing that we need to bear in mind with sagas is that they are in threes. Sagas come in threes. Anything more than a saga, when you start getting quadrilogies and you start getting even more than that, pentatrilogy, I don't even know what you would call it, a heptatrilogy. I mean, once you start over three, you're really starting to milk it for all it's worth, and there hasn't been a lot of things that have worked very, very well. There have been some, admittedly, Harry Potter, for example, but generally speaking, they're not that engaging. We simply don't have enough material to keep them working. So, how do we work it out? It works in threes, and this is the way that it works. Each one of these is a campaign. Bear that in mind. Each one of these is a campaign. Now, if your campaign happens to run over 6 months, then you could, in theory, have a saga that runs out in a year and a half. If your campaign runs over a year, you've got 3 years worth of play. As long as your campaign is times by 3, that's how long your saga is going to be. There's a reason why it's called a saga and not just a campaign. It does help if you have crazy, crazy hair too, because it definitely is a campaign saga rather than just a campaign, because crazy hair is always indicative. So how does it work? What is our stock standard approach for a saga? Well, the Greek sagas that we look at, the Danish sagas that we look at, Beowulf, for example, the saga of Beowulf. When we look at sagas, they usually work in this cycle. And when you understand how the 1-2-1 act structure works, when you understand how narrative imperative works, you start to see why. We usually have an introduction of the heroes. This is your most vanilla epic campaign that you can run, if you like. The heroes get embroiled in some kind of battle, they save the day, they save the world, and all is right, or so it seems. Now, this is a very, very important period in our saga, because, and you're going to see a little bit later on why, I'm going to come back to it. The nemesis victory. This is the second campaign. Once you have established that you are going to have a saga, and we're going to talk about how you establish that next slide. But once you've established that you're going to have a saga, this is what should happen next. The nemesis should triumph. This is where the players have been struggling against that evil galactic overlord. They've been fighting against Cthulhu, and in this one, They defeated the priest who was summoning Cthulhu. They defeated the warlord and his massive, undefeatable starship. They defeated the dragon that was supposedly riling everybody up. In this campaign, series of adventures all linked together as you would under normal circumstances create a campaign. The nemesis wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it. In this one, we discover that there is a nemesis behind the one that the players defeated in this campaign. The nemesis is more powerful. The nemesis is more intelligent. The nemesis is stronger than the players ever thought they could possibly be. This one ends on a low note. It is at this point, this is the epic campaign that concludes with the players stuck in a different dimension and a cutaway to, and as the players, as your characters are frustrated for not being able to escape from this prison, without the world burns and the great kingdom of Evermore is no longer. It is trampled underneath the dark marched boots of the Imperial army that has now taken control over all that you had so valiantly fought to save before. And scene. So, the idea is that the nemesis wins here. The players are left with their characters in a predicament, locked away, defeated in some way. Now, there are some classic sagas that have played out and have used this model. I'm not going to go into them, but generally speaking, this is the darkest of the campaigns. It's the most difficult, and you have to have informed your players that they are playing in a saga in order for them not to end this campaign going, oh my God, this is so terrible. It's so bleak. It's so dark. I'm not happy. I'm going somewhere else. I want My Little Pony. I'm not going to be playing in this thing. No, done. Thanks. You must let them know that they're playing in a saga and that this is the cycle that they are in. Now, does that take agency away from them? Does that cause the players to go, oh, well, then, if you're just controlling the whole story, what's the point in playing? No, it doesn't. They're there for the journey, and they can influence it, and they should influence it. If we turn our attention, say, to one of the greatest sagas ever, labeled a trilogy, although it is technically a saga, if we look at the original Star Wars films, in the second one, The Empire Strikes Back, rated as one of the top films of all time, by the way, higher than its predecessor, A New Hope, Star Wars A New Hope, and its subsequent third film, Return of the Jedi, The Empire Strikes Back is where Darth Vader wins. Han Solo is frozen in carbonite. The rebellion is broken and scattered. There is animosity between everybody. We don't know how they could possibly succeed because they are at their lowest point. We loved it. Everybody loved it. It's not my personal favorite. My personal favorite is Return of the Jedi, but nonetheless, there we go. So it played out, and we were left for years, because films used to take much longer than you know, they would come out, but it took years before the third film came out, and we finally got our justice, where the heroes seemed to overcome tremendous odds, which were even bigger. And that leads us to our third campaign, the PC Victory. Now, this one is the most challenging for you to operate as the game master. This one needs to go on a bigger scale than before. So if the PCs in the first one blew up a Death Star, in this one, they can't blow up a Death Star because that's boring. We've done it already. Now they need to blow up a bigger Death Star whilst at the same time fighting the entire fleet of the Empire, as well as facing the Emperor in the Dark Tower with Darth Vader. Everyone's just got to come together, and it's got to be absolutely terrifying. So in other words, this one is the one where you need to pull out all the stops. So this battle was big and climatic at the end. This one needs to be even bigger and bolder. Again, look at the Avengers saga. We've had 3 of them, technically, and this is how they have run as well. There was a little fudging in the middle where the Nemesis seemed to have victory, or did they? No. The Avengers were scattered, fighting each other at each other's throats. And then we move into the final film, which needed 2 films in order to be told, which I loved it. No spoilers, don't worry. I loved it. It was ultimately, it got to this point because, well, they need to release more films. So we kind of knew where it was going. But this final battle was the biggest battle in the history of cinema making. I'm not convinced of that claim, by the way. It was big, but I don't know if it was as big as the Battle of Helm's Deep. Anyway, that's beside the point. So 3s, got to work in 3s. I need to speed up. Okay, so bigger. Every time it's a step up. Every time it's a step up. Every time it's bigger. Bigger setting. Bigger odds. Smaller relationships. What do I mean by this? The setting needs to be bigger. So in the first one, where we are just introducing the characters to the world, to the players, the characters being introduced to the players, they're discovering who they are, they're learning about them, they're leveling up, they're powering up, they're earning their pips, they're whatever your system has for advancement. They're getting into the world. The next one has to be bigger. So now the little kingdom that they were in, now they're starting to fight in kingdoms around. Or it's not just this galaxy, it's the entire universe. Because in the third one, it's not just the universe, it's the multiverse. So we need to always get bigger. The odds need to get bigger. The first one, it's a small singular location. When we look again to Star Wars, they had to simply blow up one Death Star. They weren't fighting the entire Empire. It was just a Death Star that they needed to blow up. If we look at the Aliens trilogy, the first 3 anyway, before they brought out the 4th one, although the 4th one does make it a rather complete saga, but if we look at the Aliens trilogy, the first one was fighting one alien in a starship with fairly unprepared crew. The second one was fighting hundreds of aliens all over the place and making it so much darker because now we realize that the corporation Wayland Yutani was evil and was just trying to get these things for warfare. Then we go to the third one. Now the third one was the darkest of them. It was in a prison situation, but there was ultimate victory at the ultimate cost. Then they brought in the 4th one, which, although it is part of the entire series, they tried to ramp up. They tried to make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And although the budget was bigger for the 4th film, did they ramp up the odds? Some might say yes, some might say no. I say no. I felt that it was just a rehash, a very pretty rehash, entertaining nonetheless, but it didn't kind of take us anywhere new. So the first 3 certainly did that. But the relationships need to be smaller. So as you advance, as your campaign turns into a saga, the relationships with the NPCs need to get smaller. And by smaller, I don't mean less. By smaller, I mean more intimate. But I didn't want to write intimate there. So I mean that the groups that are involved in this process are intimately involved. So it's not just a case of, hello, Bob the blacksmith. It's, hello, Bob, how is your wife? How is your child? We develop those relationships so that the NPCs move forward. Look at how Lando Calrissian in the Star Wars films went from being just the swindler to being important. Now when we look at all 6 films, supposedly when you put them all together, he's now supposedly back in this last one. Certainly the trailer would indicate that. So we now see this journey of the NPCs as they grow and evolve. And they grow and they evolve in the relationships that are formed between the PCs and the NPCs. You must work on your NPC relationship. Even if your PCs, if your players are not the kind that really get involved with the NPCs, work on it. Drive it forward. Yes, you have to have big set pieces, you have to have big battles, you have to have big staging, but work on those smaller relationships and it will make the entire story feel bigger because now it's not just the PCs who are invested. It's the PCs plus the NPCs that they have fallen in love with that are now involved and invested. So we need to do that. However, there must be restraint. You must restrain yourself. That's right, clap yourself in a straitjacket. For not all campaigns can be sagas. And that's something that's very important. And not all players want sagas either. Not all GMs want to run them too, for that matter. They are a daunting thing to run, without a doubt. So don't force a saga to happen. Don't even plan for a saga to happen in your first campaign. When you are running it as a campaign, remember you're running, there's 3 that make up a saga. When you are launching the first one, the one that initiates the whole thing, don't plan for it to do so. Let it run as a campaign. Wait for your players towards the end of the campaign. Be like, oh, this is so cool. I don't want to stop playing in this world. I love the world. I love the characters. Once we've defeated this thing, we need more. Ah, there is your cue for your saga to begin now. Once you realize that your players are invested, and I cannot believe that you wouldn't pick up on whether they like your campaign and your world setting if you sit around the table with them for several hours every week or every second week. If the players are invested, if they want more, that's fantastic. If they're already sitting there going, oh, this is so cool, but next time I want to run a game and I want to do it in high school. I want to do a high school. I want to do Dawson's Creek. Wow, there's an old reference. This is what I want to do. I want to do that. I don't want to do... If they're at that point, there ain't no saga happening. Do not force it. It says there, don't force. Don't force it. Do not force a saga on your players. It might sound like something that you really want to do, and it is an amazing feat to achieve if you can run a saga. But don't force it. Plan, but don't plan. Oh dear, what the hell does that mean? Plan, but don't plan? How is that useful? Well, it's useful insofar as saying, create a world. And look at my campaign creation series if you don't know how. Create the world whereby your first campaign, if you are interested in creating a saga, your first campaign you purposefully limit. You purposefully make it smaller so that when you do eventually get to creating your saga, you have room for expansion. You have room to now increase and make it bigger and bigger. So that's what I mean by plan for it. But do not for a second plan beyond this could be a saga. So I'm going to create my first campaign in a small localized area. Plan your campaign, and even that you know. I don't like to plan in the minutiae. I like to have broad strokes and then work per session from there. So that is what I mean by don't plan for the saga. Just let it sit in the background and read your players. Like I said, if your players are already planning out their next character for the next adventure, the next campaign where it's set in a completely different environment, no sagas for you. I am sorry. If, however, they are looking at, how many more? Are we near the end? Because I've got this build that I really want to explore, where my character becomes a multi-class thing, and I want the thing with the thing. So how do I do that? What can I do to do that? Yes, you now have a saga, and you can start it. But you must tell your players, guys, I'm thinking of running a saga. What do you guys think about that? And they might sit back and go, yeah, sure, great. I'm not judging. You can do what you like in your bedroom. No, a saga. A saga, as in where we have 3 campaigns or more that build to tell a bigger story than what we've just done. Oh, yeah, cool, let's do that. Okay, perfect. Now you're on the right track. Off you go. Fantastic. Let them know. If they don't know what a saga is, if they don't know what to expect in a saga, there's nothing wrong with having you finish off your big campaign, you've got your big climax, and then the player's like, okay, cool, so we're going to carry on now, right? Yes, but before we do, I want to just unpack a little bit what sagas mean. So this next campaign is going to be quite dark. You're going to see how it plays out. And then in the third one, that's really where it all comes together. So don't panic if it feels like things are going off the track. Just give them that warning. That's all you need to give them. And then they can ignore it, or they can remember it, and then they can go from there. That's entirely up to them. The idea is, however, that they are prepared for the dark section, the middle section. It doesn't have to be that dark. I mean, we're not talking suddenly, babies eating their way out of mothers' wombs and all that kind of stuff. We don't talk about that. What we're talking about is the tone is darker. And you can go and have a look at the video on tone for that. So those are, in my opinion, how you run sagas and how you make sagas interesting, how you bring them to life so that people go, I want that. That's what I want. They're an incredible challenge to run, and if you do pull them off, you will certainly be a great GM, for there is no greater the reward than stringing 3 epic campaigns together to create this saga where the characters have gone on this huge journey and have come out at the other end, sometimes dead, sometimes alive, most certainly changed. Well, there's no greater glory than that. Until next time, I wish you and yours the happiest of gaming. My dear Dostoevsky, I liked your work. Full stop. But I wasn't sure that I agreed with what the characters' motivations were. I think in order for me to subscribe to your notion that humans are inherently flawed, full stop, no, comma, you will have to convince me that ringing that bell, the Goblin Bell, of course, I referred to in Chapter 5, paragraph 15, semicolon, that was worth it for the characters to go through, because I felt that it was a little bit lacking. I felt that there wasn't much motivation. And so I think your saga is ultimately more like a footnote in my book. Full stop.